This one is.
You could give me what you got, and then I could be out of one.
He wound up, without a.
All the secretaries that want. I'm so huge.
And- It was just,
We didn't know what to do without
you.
Oh, so George. Randall, I saw that wonderful sign on your grass the other day. I was gonna bring my dogs and put them right there on your grass, just to be able to. Are we there? And I was gonna say, no, and have you look like.
It's 6:01, shoot, we can't. Everybody's here.
Just like a public talk, and they can just.
Well, because they see that I try to be respectful as much as possible, but issue.
The complaint was, nuclear. Got these.
I talked to mine as we walked.
And
Now,
he said,
don't, I said, no, don't do that on the shoulder. That looks like it's very expensive. I don't want to have to pay for it.
Rather screens. Do you want the gavel?
We want to start the meeting at 6:02. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the City of Hudson Planning Board meeting. Today is April the 9th.
No.
Oh, May the 9th. God, I hope this doesn't tell me what kind of meeting I'm gonna have. And the time is 6:03 p.m. And we have all members present of the planning board except for two that are absent.
Valerie's-
One's on the Zoom.
Valerie's online, but, okay,
Have an in-person forum.
in person, we do have an in-person forum,
Yes.
okay? We have 5 minutes present. Okay, good. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion.
May I get a motion to open the public hearing on 6-12 Hudson Avenue?
You may.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, we got a letter from Chris.
We received a letter today from the applicant asking for an adjournment.
Okay, so we're going to, can I get a motion? We're gonna close this public hearing to adjourn it till next month.
Was
Yes.
it 1 month or 2 months? Do you think we need?
What, didn't she say June? Was June? She's in her.
Ryan, based on what you've seen, and we have not had a submission, do you think it makes sense to adjourn the hearing for 1 month or 2 months so that we can?
I think the applicant indicated that they were hoping to be back before us in June. We haven't received any new materials addressed to the planning board at this time. But should they come back in time, I think probably to adjourn till June would be prudent.
All right, June. Okay, we're gonna adjourn 6-12 Hudson Avenue until June. So can I get a motion to adjourn, to close the public hearing for 6-12,
Adjourn it.
to adjourn it until June 2020?
Well, let's get the meeting date.
What is the meeting?
The next meeting in June is the
13th.
13th planning board meeting. So adjourn the public hearing until June 13th at 6 p.m.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn? Okay.
I make a motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so. Can I get a motion to open up the next public hearing?
For 7:35.
735-737 Columbia Street. Motion to open, a motion to open. Okay, all right. Okay, so it's
All in
7:35.
favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, it's 7:35 here. Which presenter we're gonna have first? You, Matt?
I feel like we should maybe do the environmental phase 1, phase 2 talks first.
That might take a while. Yeah. So you wanna do the long one first?
Yep.
Okay.
So we have Michaela, who is on screen, and we also have Connor, who is the person who did our study as well, and can speak to the technicalities of things.
Good.
Okay, Linda Kayla. Okay. Is that the one?
Hi, yes, we're here.
Michaela's upper right. So we've sent our phase two documents in, and then we also sent in the soil management plan. And so I guess we would just be looking to discuss any issues that the board has or questions.
Okay, we have our consultant here. Ryan, who did the study on this in the review.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This evening with me is Stefan Truick, who is a geologist with our colleague of mine, who has done a lot of work in environmental contamination and remedial work. He has reviewed the submitted information and assisted in preparing the comment letter that we sent over to the board yesterday. So at this time, when it comes to the environmental components of the project, I'll turn it over to Stefan to review some of our comments and have any questions or discussion therein, and then we can touch on the other comments in the letter after that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Ryan. So based on the review of the Labella Phase 2 environmental assessment, we found that there were petroleum contaminated soils found during the investigation above the CP 51 Commissioner's policy. We noticed that the DEC was not notified of the detected compounds. And as such, we feel that the applicant is responsible for working with the DEC to determine if remedial concerns still exist at the site prior to redevelopment. We feel the applicant should report the spill to the DEC spill hotline. And if the department feels that there is a remedial concern, we would think petroleum impacted soils encountered during construction need to be managed appropriately. Analytical results should be compared to relevant guidance. And confirmation soils should be collected per DEC guidance. We also found that PCBs were historically manufactured in the United States between 1929 and 1979. The site use was historically used as a repair shop. We feel that the applicant should conduct a supplemental investigation to determine if PCBs are present at the site. Another topic that we wanted to make note was arsenic was identified by PVE above commercial use soil cleanup objectives during the investigation. And this is referring to the supplemental investigation. We feel the applicant should reconsider placement of vegetable and herb gardens in their current locations due to the known arsenic detections. I feel like those arsenic detections should be compared to background maps from published sources. And we also feel that the applicant should consider analytical testing of surface soils adjacent to proposed vegetable and herb gardens. EC and TC, also known as tetrachloroethylene and trichloroethylene, were detected in air samples collected below the building foundation slab at concentrations over the laboratory reporting limit. As such, we feel that these compounds need a proper comparison to the New York State Department of Health technical guidance. Feel the applicant should conduct indoor air sampling during heating season in accordance with published New York State Department of Health guidance to confirm that no further mitigation or monitoring action is necessary or required during development. That concludes my comments after review.
Right.
Are there any questions from the planning board? Anybody? This one has one question. All of your recommendations were not mentioned in what they had proposed. In their letters that they wrote us, none of that stuff was in there.
Correct. So these are comments on what was submitted. This is either supplemental investigations
Right.
or additional work that needs to be done.
Okay, so additional work has to be done. Okay, any, does the applicant have any questions?
I would like to ask Connor if he could speak to any of the points that were made. And no pressure, Connor, if you understand all of them and there's no discussion, but.
Yeah, hey, Connor Tarbell here. Thank you again for those comments, Stefan. Yeah, I would love if I could get a written copy of those, and I would, yeah, I would love to itemize those and respond to those with a written letter. Speaking to the gardens, in regards to the arsenic concentrations above the commercial soil cleave objectives, would that additional testing and concerns be applicable, or maybe even alleviated if these were raised bed gardens not set in the existing soils?
Yes, yep, that was a suggestion I had mentioned in the letter, and yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, great. And then in terms of the chlorinated solvents detected in the soil vapor, we didn't collect or at least analyze any indoor ambient air samples just based on the former use of the structure. And I'm sure a lot of the chemicals that may or still have been present or maybe still off-gassing inside the structure. But in terms of the subslab concentrations, we felt that they were low enough that it wouldn't warrant any additional sampling. But yeah, we understand your concerns about wanting an additional round of sampling during the heating season once a heating implement is operational installed in that structure. We agree that it would warrant additional sampling.
Sure, yeah, after review, you know, it looked like you had collected the indoor air samples. It looks like you just never ran them. So I think, you know, it'd be prudent to run those for proper comparison to the DOH guidance.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll make sure to grab an inventory too of any chemicals or anything that might still be present inside that structure that would present a false positive of any of those chlorinated solvents that might skew the decision matrices for the DOH guidance.
Good.
Okay, Connor, we, to send you this report, do we have your email address on file?
You can send it to me.
Send it to you? Okay, great. Okay, so we'll send it to Matt.
And as long as it's okay with the board, you know, if there's any questions or you know,
Exactly.
coordination that needs to take place, you know, Connor or the applicant, you know, we're more than happy to hop on
okay
a
with
conference
us.
call or go back and forth.
It's okay with us.
I have a, maybe a layperson's question. With regards to testing during heating season, is there any way to simulate that, given that we're going into air conditioning season?
Put on the heat.
Yeah, that would be an option, you know, wait till a colder day and put on the heat. Also, you know, that is a recommendation in the guidance. So I would just think if you want to stick close to the recommendation,
Yes, we do.
yeah, that would be helpful.
Right, board, right?
I think he's asking if he has to wait until the winter, but you're saying
Right.
you can put on the heat now.
Well, that would be a question about whether we were interested in testing this sort of installed system, which obviously we wouldn't get to because we would need this approval to go through building permit to put in the new heating system. There's like 2 ceiling mounted propane heater, like sort of like fancy space heaters there right now. There's no central heat. So we could turn those on, but I also don't know what kind of shape those machines are in themselves. And we wouldn't be using those to heat the space. So it's sort of like a chicken or the egg thing. Like, how do we test the heating before it's in? Would be a question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and hopefully the guidance goes into alternative testing strategies.
But it has to be tested.
It's a recommendation from the Environmental Health Guidance.
Mhm.
And
Right,
but if there's no heat in the building, and we won't be able, won't be granted a building permit to put that heat in the building, we'll just have to find another way to sort of satisfy recommendations. Because if the recommendation is just to test the heating, we won't really be able to fulfill that without a building permit.
The existing heating system is going to be completely replaced as part of the redevelopment.
Yes,
Correct.
so is it basically just to test for these chemicals under the conditions of a heat source?
So it's more about a negative pressure that's created during heating. So if you, Connor, if you were able to simulate a negative pressure, during your sampling effort, I think that would suffice.
Yeah, we can review some options on how to create that closed building envelope, negative indoor pressure that would best simulate an indoor heating season sampling event. Alternatively, and something we can discuss internally with the development team, is maybe just installing a passive system during site redevelopment. It's not terribly expensive, it's not terribly intrusive. And then if that satisfies the town, once the building is redeveloped and the heating implement is installed and we're able to replicate that sampling real time, we can determine whether or not to activate that system based on those results.
Sure, and actually, one of the comments I had was that the applicant should consider use of a vapor barrier and SSDS system during construction. So yes, I think that if you were to go that route, that would also, I think, follow the guidance. So good suggestion, and thank you, Connor.
Could I ask a question about DEC, just to understand the suggestion there? And also just for myself to understand the sort of steps, and maybe Connor, you understand them as they were said, but yeah, layperson question. So I guess it wasn't really a recommendation. It sounds like more of a requirement is that this needs to be submitted, that the findings from the existing surveys and also this additional testing need to go through DEC prior to being able to complete site plan review. Is that correct?
I think what I heard was that the outdoor spill needs to be reported.
Yeah, I mean, anyone with knowledge of a petroleum release is required to report a spill per DEC requirements.
So we have to get something from DEC prior to approving.
So the spill would need to be reported to DEC. The planning board could consider other proposals in terms of when, whatever the DEC is going to require for the closeout of that spill.
Okay.
I think the planning board would want to see that and then make a determination whether that's a condition or whatever it may be. But, in order to first call in, report the spill, and then get that feedback from DEC on what they're going to require in order to satisfactorily close out that spill.
Sure, and it's actually, I'll move forward with that effort. I mean, it's a 5-minute phone call to DEC that anyone can do. The follow-up steps after that can take some time, but as far as actually reporting the spill, it's a pretty simple process.
Okay. And then were there comments? I mean, I know that you sort of point out the soil management plan and that should be satisfied during construction. Were there comments on the content of the soil management plan? Or did you find that itself was sufficient? Should that be followed?
We felt that was sufficient. I think that, in lieu of any additional testing, for PCBs and arsenic that was previously mentioned.
Okay, so that's the additional testing for PCBs and arsenic in addition to the existing soil management plan, and everything else with it is sort of sufficient.
Sure, and as Connor could probably explain, that additional testing may have implications on your soil management plan.
Sure.
Hopefully not for the progress of the project, but those things can happen.
All right, do we have any questions from the public? This is a public hearing. And do we have a hand raised, anybody's on? Okay, so we can move on to the next subject of seven.
Oh, for 7:37.
Yeah, we're still at 7:37. Should we do the parking next? We can have the parking,
Yeah, I mean, we can touch on parking.
right?
Parking has been a concern of the board, since the application was submitted. And, what Teresa asked me to do was pull together, basically summarize the applicant's parking study as well as parking studies from other nearby projects that the board reviewed. And so I simply, pulled them together and said, you know, this was what this study said in this neighborhood and this study in this neighborhood, and the applicant's project is here. And so, once you have a chance to review it, you will have to decide as a board whether the applicant study is satisfactory or whether you want additional work from the applicant or you want to hire a professional to assist the board with reviewing the parking.
Well, we got it today and I sent it out. Did everyone in the board get a chance to take a look at it? So do I have any comments from the board?
Yeah, you know, my bugaboo has been parking for almost ever. You know, my concern, and not to cite this specific project, is the number of parking spaces needed within probably a 5 or 6 square block area, including the hospital. I mean, it's a thing where if all of these event spaces had an event on the same night, it would be mayhem, you know? And, you know, there was a point back, I guess we were reviewing another project and there was a parking question on 4th Street.
Mhm.
The study was done in the middle of January. It was 21 degrees with a 15-mile-an-hour wind and nobody was out. And I brought that up when it happened. You know, I think we got to bring some realism into the parking situation here, even considering the fact that the city has done their own parking study or is doing their own parking study. We're going to probably find different versions every time we have a project come up. You know, but you have the pocketbook factory, you have 7th Street, you have breweries, you have, you know, Union Street. The one project that I think is still kind of in limbo was 620 Union at the corner of 7th Street. And there was a lot of conversation about parking in that one. So, you know, the city is doing a plan. I think that we should probably maybe input somehow into it because, you know, it's gonna be a thing that, we're 2.5 square miles. You know, and there are also,
What does
there's
that?
so many cars you can park,
50 blocks and, you know, which 1.5,
Whatever.
it's like 50 blocks.
whatever. it
How
is,
much
yeah.
can you put into that?
Yeah, and especially if there are a lot of events going on at the same time. You know, and we have no control over any of that, obviously. But, I think, you know, plan is necessary. Right, I'm sticking to it.
Because in the review of the study, we found that, your study didn't mention, about the, it didn't take account into the previous approved developments. And maybe that's because you didn't know. So, they're all posted on our website, the applications we have approved. And maybe you need to take a look at that. Okay, because right now your study is just overlapping parking that they've already said and committed to. So we don't know what we're gonna do about this, but I'm a believer of parking. I live it every day. And I know someone said, well, no resident has a right to park in front of their house. Well, you know what? Maybe not in front, but near. And to upset the residents of Hudson because of that, I can't go with that. Also, I know that the city is working on doing some things for parking. They have an ad hoc committee that I did listen to. And then some suggestions were thrown around, but nothing is being done, nothing is done yet, and I'm hoping that Tom will have one of us on that committee. So, until then, this is gonna be a problem, this is gonna be an issue that's gonna come up with the planning board every time. Any questions from the planning board for parking for 735?
So
And
the question is, do you want to hire a professional or do you want just the applicant to give you more information? What's the
I
next step?
kind of would like them, we have, you know. In my opinion, we have studies. You know, how much could you study 50 blocks? I would like them to go back to the drawing board, look at the projects that are already approved and try to find their parking from there. And then, you know, if they can't do it on their own, then we're gonna have to bring someone in who we can understand where they're getting the stuff from. Because right now, they're not telling us enough. So I would like to send them back to the drawing board for that, not do it for them.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, can I get?
No, I just to,
Wait. Any questions from the board? Okay. Now you're next. All right,
I guess, a couple of questions. So we, you know, you sort of said the same thing a few weeks ago to go back to the drawing board, which we did. We reached out to new people to try to understand what the capacities were to work with other businesses to share lots. We looked at the distance between any public lots to the train station. We feel that we have gone back to the drawing board and have every time sort of continued to make new efforts for parking. And we have also requested, other studies which weren't sent to us. And I guess I'm wondering, when you say to go and look at other people's studies and what they've done that are on your website, is it to sort of?
I said, look at other projects that have been approved. And when you're looking at those projects, you'll see the parking needs or the parking recommendations that have been put on them and what they have committed to make sure you're not committing to the same parking spaces that they have.
For instance, your parking study counted spaces and you
Sure.
counted a lot of available spaces on 7.
Sure.
But it just happens to be the same place where there's a big 134 unit development going up that's gonna add curb cuts and it's gonna take away some of the off-street parking, and 134 residents are gonna be using that parking. So it just, your study didn't.
Right, but I guess it sounded like there was an insinuation that we had somehow gone into those projects and copied their parking studies or what they're suggesting.
Wow.
So it's public. The thing that I'm struggling with is those are public parking spots. Nobody owns those spots. So I don't see how referring to public parking spots is not acceptable if there's overlap with other projects. Isn't that just the nature of a public parking spot? Like, of course there will be overlaps, you know?
This is the struggle that the board is having. I mean, you're proposing a very high intensity project. It's not just a restaurant, it's a restaurant and an event space.
Right, at any time, you
So-
can have anywhere from 328 to 398 people at your event alone.
So the board is reviewing it to make sure that this project can work in this location. And yes, you're absolutely correct, the parking is shared by all, but if 4 projects are trying to share the same parking,
Sure.
the concern here is the impact on the residents that are already using those spaces.
Sure, and I understand. I think we're all experiencing the same thing, which is somewhat of an impasse. So does that mean, because the other thing is we reached out to multiple businesses to try to sort of come up with agreements about sharing larger lots. And everyone sort of came back with the same response, which is that, for insurance purposes, it's not in their interest to share their lots. And there is no sense of sort of.
Well, I mean, did you offer compensation or is it you just?
Of
asking-
course.
Yeah,
of
okay,
course.
so even if you pay for the
It
insurance,
was a hard no.
interesting.
from City Center, it was a hard no. St. Charles has also decided that they do not want to engage in that conversation. And I think I'd like to talk just for a few minutes, like, about if there's a tolerance for us, I guess, running our business in such a way that we don't want our customers to be circling the block looking for parking either, because that's not good on us. People would stop coming to us if they can't find parking. And so, I think that if we could look at this project in two separate entities, in the sense that we have a restaurant that already exists on that block,
Right,
that is, so it's kind of
and what's your capacity, about 60 people? 40,
50 seats.
50 seats, okay, so you're going from a 50 seat to a, what, 80 seat restaurant alone?
Roughly.
And you're going, and what is the maximum, even on the outside? That the little areas that you've taken up on the outside, what about add another 20?
Like in the garden,
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah,
That could be, yeah.
okay, so you're going from maybe at 80 now currently to anywhere between 328 to 398 spaces.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that max that we're talking about, those will not be like every night of operation. And I know that you need to operate from a place of assuming that it might be, but that where it is going to max out is going to probably be because of an event that is catering to a marriage. It's catering to a private event that could be, the parking for that could be managed separately than the actual ongoing operation of the restaurant itself. There's also ways, and this is where I do think we do need to engage in a professional, that where not everyone drives to this place. Like Hudson is a pedestrian town, and like I can walk to Little Dev's, like people, like, so what is the discount applied to our seat count that, you know, gives us a real number? And I think we need to get to that too. So I guess to go back to my original point is the events that we're gonna have, whether it's, you know, a wedding or something like that, that could be managed through shuttles, for example. And like, how do we talk about that? Is that something
I
we can
think
propose?
you need to propose that,
Okay,
and
Yeah,
then it gets evaluated by the board.
okay,
so.
So, and then it could be made condition too, where, you know, you cannot use the event space unless you have provided alternate, I mean, those are the kinds of workarounds that
Yeah.
you can think about.
Or you can't take it to full capacity right now, maybe later when
But
the
that's-
city does
see,
something.
From an enforcement perspective, anything where it requires someone to go in and count, it's gonna be
It's gonna be
impossible
hard.
because, you know, we don't, in general, our CEO doesn't work on Saturday nights, and
Neither do I.
we don't wanna,
you can go to dinner anytime.
That's true.
at full price.
Full price, yes. That is good.
And I think to that point, you know, we're put some of what, it's good that we're talking about this now because the event space is also central to the whole purpose for doing this new project, right? And also to expand what Little Debs can do. They already have a big catering and event program, but they just don't have a space for it. And you know, they've been in Hudson at the current space for 6 years, and they're ready to grow and move on, and they want to stay in Hudson to do that. They want to stay in Hudson, you know, to the place that they know and love, and where a lot of their community is. Then they don't want to leave to go to go somewhere else to do that. So I think, and so the reason why I bring that up is because I think would like to get this all sorted before, you know, moving forward with the project, because they chose this site and this program with this overall sort of business model and creative plan in mind. It's really central to the project. So I think we do sort of need to find a way to get to a place of approvals for the events, because if it was just a restaurant, they would just be in the same space that they are now. You know, this is supposed to be a new phase, a new chapter. And so I guess, you know, I just want us to sort of be clear that this like Matt said, we should find a way to sort of think about them separately, but obviously, I think we're all trying to get to a place where we have approval for the overall thing so that so that this project can continue, or else we don't know if it can. And that's something to find out.
So, I mean, the other piece is that you're building a new building instead of occupying the existing space. So it's just creating like that. There's already a lot of buildings that are using the spaces, and you're not just filling in the building, you're building a big addition. And so that's why.
We're not building anything.
Small addition for
But
storage.
isn't the back portion being converted?
Well, it's, I mean, it's.
But it's an existing space.
It's not for what you want to do with it.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole space isn't. for
Right,
what
but
it is.
you're not moving into a former restaurant space, you're creating new events. So that's why there's this delta, what
Yeah.
new impact.
Of course,
And so to me, it's like that delta, it's like, should we be focusing on the delta?
No, because someone's gonna go reoccupy Little Deb's old space. It's not like when you leave it, it gets blacked out. That space will continue to exist and have parking needs as well.
Well,
Sure.
they won't be citizens.
And so,
They won't be a New York Times bestseller. I guarantee it.
Okay, do we
I
have,
guess, can I just,
I think the applicant would, I mean, I hear the concerns here. I think they might appreciate hearing from a professional consultant on what they should be including or presenting in their study.
okay, board, do you guys agree with us? Agree? So can I get a motion?
and can I just ask, before we close out this topic, I don't know if you're asking to, I just wanted to make sure to ask one more thing before we close it out. I don't know if that's happening now, or if you were making a motion for another question.
You finish. Let me finish the motion.
Okay,
Can I get a motion to refer their parking study to a consultant? So we can get a more clear vision of what is needed for this particular applicant.
Well, you should identify which consultant, and actually, we should probably do a quick attorney-client session.
Okay, let's do it quicker.
Well,
Do we have to get a motion for that?
we have to kick everyone out, so maybe we'll do it at the end.
Yeah.
So like.
Excuse me? Sorry, excuse me. I've had my hand raised for some time. A member of the public, Margaret Morris, on the Common Council.
Okay, Margaret, give us 1 minute, let her finish what
Got
she's
it.
saying.
Yes, absolutely got it. Thank you.
I need to discuss with the board an issue regarding consultants. So
Okay,
we just,
so we'll do it at the end?
yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, so we're gonna just table this. We'll get back.
We'll take the vote at the end.
Okay, all right, Margaret, because I was gonna
Yes.
ask any questions from the board.
So,
and more questions from the public.
I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, I am on the parking committee for the Common
Yes.
Council. The city did
I thought it was-
we did a parking study recently, and one of the upshots of that was that we were going to have a committee to look at this and come up with a parking group. I really applaud the planning board for addressing the issue of parking, not just on this project, but in general, and the issue of residents being able to park somewhere near where they live so that they can have a livable city. I think this is excellent. And I particularly want to applaud you, Chair, I think it was you, Chair, who recommended that a member of the planning board be part of the parking committee. And I will certainly bring that back to our chair, Tom
Thank
Di
you.
Pietro. And I am very happy to hear this discussion this evening. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, I wasn't ignoring your hand, I just.
Oh,
didn't
no,
get-
it's okay. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, anyone else from the public have a comment on the parking for 735?
can I
Okay,
ask the question that I was
okay, go ahead.
is, okay, so zooming out, like, just so also we understand what the sort of paths forward are, and like what, just so that we're also preparing ourselves, because when we first got this project, when we first started looking into the code and the zoning, we did a deep dive to try to understand what the legislation was around it, and pulled this section from the code, that's section 325.19, and it's detailed regulations for off-street parking, and B says that required off-street, is the comment about required off-street parking spaces. And it says parcels of real property to be developed within the city of Hudson shall not be required to establish a minimum number of accessory off-street parking spaces, period. That's in the code. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, does that code sort of fall? Can that be overruled by the planning board if you decide, or is that?
Well, we can't give you legal advice, and so you might wanna, your project team probably has an attorney, but in general, the zoning law sets minimum standards that projects have to meet. And so there's no minimum standard. The code doesn't say you must have 40 spaces no matter what, and you can't provide 40, you don't provide 39, and now you can't meet that requirement. Instead, the board is doing a review under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, reviewing impacts on the community. And so they're not, I haven't heard anyone saying you need 100 spaces. What they're actually doing is looking at the impact that your project is going to have on the quality of life in the community, the ability of residents to park nearby, and ultimately what the, I can't think of what the word is, but there's a certain level of parking that you can get to where it's considered, people can find spaces within a few minutes, and then you exceed that threshold and it becomes much harder for people to find spaces.
Sure.
And that's where we need to figure out where your project puts the area.
Yeah, and we want that too, like that's been the discussion since day one. We have all care deeply about Hudson, live and work in Hudson. Like that's something that we are committed to. It's also tricky when it's in the face of, it's not saying that no minimum shall be required. It literally says the city of Hudson shall not be, that the property shall not be required to establish a minimum number of off-street spaces. Like there is no minimum required, period. And I just want to bring that up. And I don't want, it's not that I love to quote from the code. It's not my favorite thing to do. It's just really, hard when we do feel like there was a reason why this was developed with the city, and there was a reason why the city sort of opted to go this route and put it into legal writing that this is not a requirement. So I do want to put that out there, and it is hard for us because we're trying to work with you to come up with a solution that we think will benefit everyone. I don't think that Little Deb's is the kind of restaurant that would do a business just because they wanted to, or because they just wanted money, or that's not what's happening here. And so it's challenging. It's challenging to feel like we're trying to add something to the city, and we are literally following the law, and it's insufficient. And we have also asked many times for a clear answer of what you want, although it's not required by code. So I agree. I think it would be great to have something a little bit firmer from you, rather than just go back to the drawing board again and go back to look at other projects that are not the same as ours. And because there is nothing in the code that has, firm guidelines, if you're choosing to take a different path that's not outlined by code, then we're amenable. We just need, those guidelines, those firm guidelines.
Any more questions from the public? Okay, so we're gonna move on now to Matt. You were gonna go over the what was it? The sound, yeah. Thank you. For 7:35.
Let's bring that up on screen.
The
Letter. Yeah, I didn't send it again.
No, I got it, but I was already reached. I have not printed. I can't.
Okay, I don't have it. Got it.
My internet's not strong enough.
None of us.
Matt, this one.
Yeah.
I read it.
Did everyone on the planning board get that?
Yeah.
It came in at the last minute.
Yeah.
Came in at 4:36. I sent it to you, so you don't have to give it up.
So is this is a different company?
It is the same.
It's the same company, but
It's the same company.
yeah, the letter is written different.
It
Can you
is.
put it up? Oh, there it is. There it
Can you
is.
make it a little?
There's two. I was just wanted to see which one we wanted to look at first.
I mean, I think we should start with the actual letter, and then I think we could go into the Patrick's qualifications, if that's all right.
Okay.
But I don't know if you want to take the time to read it, or shall I read it aloud? What do you want?
Review it, yes.
Oh, okay. So,
We keep yours, I'll give them.
so we're
Mine's
just
such a
starting
weird
with
section.
just acknowledging that we understand what the ordinances are, like first and foremost. He's got a copy of the site plan and he understands the intended uses of the space. So he knows what we're trying to accomplish here. And then we go into the overview, which is the same as last time, where the strategy of for the back, of just creating an envelope for the building, use soundproofing walls and ceilings, specialty equipment to control and mitigate sound volume levels. That's anything from, you know, just having a decibel meter, meter that is visible so that when you're in the room, you know how loud it is. And that then goes into an awareness of and respect for outside volume levels, which is the reason that we're all here. So, and if you could scroll up just a little bit for the event space. And these are the same things that I read the last time, so I don't wanna bore you. But,
No, you're not boring us, because some of us were not here,
okay,
okay, so.
okay.
Please.
So, you know, for the event space, the construction and acoustic insulation work will achieve an acoustic envelope, which will reduce the sound output to within the code standards, like 40 and 60 decibel levels, depending on time. Such that any indoor performance at an average decibel level of 100 to 115 would fall below the outdoor sound limits in the statutes. And we could use specific construction elements to accomplish this, and they may include, I'm saying may because we have to design the building, yeah, but there's a list of 9 things that we could do a mixture of to make sure that this envelope is sealed for that back event space. Number 1, spray foam insulation in the ceilings and sealed with sound reflective surface material. Specialty insulating materials in the walls, i.e. like green goo, high density foam, fiber cloth sheets, and internal air gaps between walls, which is very important so that the reverberations don't go outside. Sound absorbent panels and interior materials to absorb sound that will be used within the space. And then air gaps and decoupled construction elements to minimize structural vibration and sound transfer within the building to outside. And we keep going, we got 5 more things we can do. For exit and entryway doors, each door should be built with an interior vestibule containing a second door, which will prevent the sound bleeds from when the patrons enter and exit. So you don't open the door and there's like a spike of music coming out and then it quiets down as it closes. That vestibule would mitigate that. The speakers should be professionally installed and mounted with subwoofers being installed on top of sound absorbing boxes to minimize vibration. And then any windows that we're gonna have should be double paned, air gapped, with a neoprene seal, effectively soundproofing the window to match the rejection coefficient of the walls. And the performance stage area to be built with sound dampening properties in mind to reduce vibration, to absorb excess sound frequencies internally. The overall interior sound levels should be managed by the client. So once it's in operation, it becomes on us to like manage how we work in this space so that the building elements can provide sufficient sound rejection to meet the exterior decibel limits for the statutes, which just 65 decibel levels outdoor between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. and 55 between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. To that end, an interior decibel meter should be installed inside the venue so that those inside can measure the overall volume of performances, keeping the level within the threshold of what the structure can actually take and protect against. A noise assessment can be performed during construction to establish that the measure of the effectiveness of the soundproofing using decibel meters, both inside and out, can be conducted. And then for the restaurant and the outdoor patio, decibel meters can be installed to allow for appropriate volume management, so we know where we are at all times. And then we could, Patrick can also advise on the use of materials and plantings to further dampen the sound levels. And that would come during the design phase. And that's Patrick. So he would advise on all of those issues, and then we would pass it on to the architect and the engineer, who could validate them and install, and then we would test it during construction, and then once it's done. Any questions on this part?
Even though they're still using the word should. I mean, how do you feel?
Well,
We understand it much better now.
okay.
It's used in better context.
I might have said should, because that might have been in the context of, Patrick's our consultant. He's
Yes.
not gonna be there to
And
volume
he's telling you
switch.
right. That's
So he's
exactly,
like, we should do this.
exactly.
So,
So-
what we were,
understand.
what the board was looking for though, was his professional opinion that if you do those shoulds, so if you use the insulation in the ceilings, and if you put in these downstairs panels, then it will fall within the, acoustical.
Yeah, I just want to, if we look at this one line, I just want to bring the attention to that in response to that. So for the event space, the construction and acoustic insulation work will achieve an acoustic envelope, which will reduce sound output by between 40 and 60 decibels, such that any indoor performance averaging would fall below the outdoor sound limits. So I think that we did sort of do this revision where in places that we, wanted to make sure that you knew that these are not just suggestions, that this is sort of a signed document saying that.
So I just go back to enforcement, because, once this is approved, we want this to be smooth sailing. We don't want you to be held up at the last minute over something. You can't get your CO, you can't open because of some issue. So if it says here, just as an example, speakers should be professionally installed and mounted, and you didn't do it. And now Craig's saying, where's your certificate? Show me that this was done by professional. And you said, oh, well, it was just a should, I don't have to. So I think we're looking for some commitments that you will take certain steps.
So I think with these bullet points, I think maybe the hesitation was that because the building hasn't been designed yet, to say should to all of these might become a burden on us, because maybe not all of them are needed if they're done in the right mix. We're saying that these are things that we could do in order to achieve this goal up here. So I guess we're hesitant to say, like, we most likely will put the speakers on a block foam so that there's no vibration. So maybe we need to parse those out, but that's our
You're committing to
intention.
some, and then the others might, right.
Right.
Again, I'm not a sound engineer, so I'm just evaluating it from an enforcement point of view. How do we make sure that we have a project which will be compliant?
Right. So, I
Well,
mean,
this one is certainly better than the first one, that's for sure. Can we all agree to that?
Yes.
Okay.
great. I mean, is it Craig out there with a sound?
Do you want them out there? We don't even want to get to that.
But you're right, we are going to have to test and validate it somehow, and the ultimate goal is we need to be compliant with the city code, like full stop, like there's no wiggle room around that, so it's in our best interest to be compliant, so.
Randy, you had something to say?
Well, didn't on the last project, the pocketbook factory, that in the last phase that they submitted to the fact that when the project was complete, they would do testing for compliance.
Yes,
Yeah.
you did.
Can we do a similar thing here?
I think they were gonna do it, we wasn't gonna do it.
No, we required
Oh,
that.
we were gonna do, it? Okay.
Yeah, so can we require a
Yeah,
similar
we can do
thing?
the same thing.
Yeah.
Certainly can,
We
good
could.
idea.
Yeah.
Great idea. This way we don't have to send it to a consultant.
Okay,
Sounds good, much better than before. I mean, I even understood it, so.
Well, that was because of my, you know, my
Magic.
presentation. skills.
Very good.
Um,
I love this guy.
I'm here every month.
Keep coming back every month.
Yeah, and so the person who did this, if we just want to talk about that, his name is Patrick Higgins. And he is a sound engineer, he's a composer, he's a producer. He's been in the industry for 20 years and he has created many environments that need a secure envelope, not only for keeping sound from going outside, but because of the nature of recording, keeping sound from coming in to the room. He actually, Future Past, if you know the church on 6th Street, it's a studio, a sound studio.
Yes, six
That's-
in Columbia,
Yeah, that's his.
the one we just gave up a bit to.
And so, he's also very, very familiar with venues throughout the world, like in Berlin and London and Paris that are, it is side by side, the sound ordinance are off the charts and these people have figured out a way to contain the sound, not only within the building, but also how they deal with their patrons coming and going, so that they can continue to do business. It's in our best interest for us not to be a nuisance to the neighborhood.
Okay, what, yeah, and we did get this time we got a letter as to who the person was, and that was great. We thank you for that presentation, and we thank you for the update. Any questions from the planning board? Any more questions from the planning board on the sound? Any questions from the public? Okay, so as far as 7:35, 7:37.
Make a motion to continue the public hearing for the
Okay.
June 13th, yeah.
We're gonna make a motion to continue the public hearing. I'm gonna get a motion to continue the public hearing for 7:35, 7:37 Columbia Street until our June 13th
At 6 p.m.
at 6 p.m. Meeting. I'll second that. Oh. Should we go? No, so, no.
I
Yeah,
can cover.
yes, we should do that.
It was just- Okay, let's forget about that because there is something new down the pipe that may affect this applicant that we're gonna meet Ryan to present tonight. He's gonna present it to us and an explanation form after, but right now we need to.
Correct. Thanks, Teresa. So, yeah, as Teresa mentioned, under other business, we'll go into a little bit more detail on the process and what it means for all projects at the city of Hudson. But specifically when it comes to this application, and Matt will make sure that you get a copy of the comments so that you guys can appropriately respond. We were looking for a couple of clarifications. Really, the topic is wastewater, sewer, sanitary sewer demand in connection to the existing sewer system at the site. So as part of that and in coming in new, being retained by the board on this application in the last month, wanted to clarify the nature of the event space. And I think this evening I've gotten some additional clarification. But the reason really being is whether this would be classified typically as a concert hall and a theater primarily, or exclusively, or also as a banquet hall. In other words, will there be food service? Trying to clarify that from a wastewater demand perspective. Likewise with the garden seating, standing that's listed on the site plan as compared to the restaurant and bar, and how that operationally, whether they're all functioning as restaurant food service space, or whether the garden potentially there's a deviation between the restaurant and bar seating for 80 people versus the garden seating standing, whether that's functioning simply as a bar or a lounge, because that all will impact wastewater demand. And really culminating in a comment and a request to provide wastewater flow information for the proposed capacity of the building. So in the letter, there's links to how to calculate that. So it's all based on, for a restaurant, it's per seat. And the reason for asking for this is under, the city, has a permit to operate their sewer system and the wastewater treatment plant. And under that permit, they're required to, review and send to DEC for review and approval any sewer extensions, so that's multiple hookups, or individual connections with greater than 2,500 gallons per day of anticipated flow. As a point of reference, an 80-seat restaurant by itself, thought I had it written down. And I can tell you, I can do it off the top of my head, but an 80-seat restaurant by itself would be about 2,800 gallons per day. So what we're really trying to establish is what is the anticipated wastewater demand at the site, so that we can then coordinate with DEC to determine if a sewer extension approval is required. And then there is a comment in here as well about if a sewer extension is required, what's going to need to be done for that. And that would require an engineering report, because then the city, on behalf, that engineering report gets reviewed by the city, and then the city in turn sends that along to DEC for their final approval to modify the sewer system. So a couple clarifications there, and then a request basically to provide a tabulated. And it sounds like the seating and standing capacity are not additive. Is that correct?
Additive to.
So on the seating capacity chart, I think if you look at the seating, the standing, the event space and the restaurant and bar, it comes up to about 456. But then it says total persons 398, which is basically, so just trying to understand the total capacity.
Well, I think we were, and Michaela maybe wants to chime in on this, I don't want to steal her thunder, but you know, there's a capacity that you can look at based on the square footage, right? But there's also just how many people we want in there and operating our business.
Yeah.
You know, just because you can have 450 doesn't mean that our kitchen and staff can handle that many. And so I think that's also kind of going back to the parking, just because we can, doesn't mean that we would. And so how do we agree upon what the right capacity is? Would it be what we say it's gonna be, or would it be calculated as a result of what the actual square footage is?
Right, yeah, it's that sort of question in code, you know, if it's an assembly space and we're looking at gross square footage. Or depending on the use, either GSF gross square footage or net square footage, NSF per occupant, that gets you to sort of what you're technically allowed by code, but it's often denser than would be comfortable. And like Matt said, you know, can be bigger than what the floor plan allows from a design perspective. So that's where you get the sort of discrepancy in numbers of what the sort of occupancy load is by GSF calculations per code. And then I tried to list it separately as seating count, which is more reflective of our actual floor plan.
I'm not sure that answered the question. I thought you were doing the seating or standing as alternates. Could it both happen together with that number? Can that?
Yeah, no, that is cumulative. That's the total number of both.
So on the seating capacity, if we look at the 80, and I think this is based on the code calculation. The restaurant and bar is 80 persons, the event space, not 190, garden seating 58, and garden standing 128. So that adds up to 456. However, if we remove this garden seating, that's where we end up at the 398. So either way, we don't iron it out now. It just, as you calculate your anticipated wastewater demand, it needs to be, if the standing is an option, and that's going to be, it needs to be at that capacity. Likewise, you know, I understand your point as, you know, per square foot versus how you design it. So the restaurant, you might only have 75 seats or something like that. And so, you know, with the wastewater demand, it just should be aligned to the design of it and what's going to be essentially permitted by the board in the city, you know, through the process.
Also, I don't want to keep beating this horse, but if you have a site plan approved that shows 5 outdoor tables, that's what is allowed by the site plan. And if someone came out and had 10 or 20 tables out there, there would be a potential violation.
Yeah, of course, yeah, understood. So, but it sounds like the request. Sorry, Matt.
I was asking who does the environmental report, is that on us or is that,
That would be on, that's the applicant.
okay,
Yeah.
Yes, you.
But you're requesting a sort of engineer plan either from a civil engineer for waste.
Correct, and as a first step, you know, as opposed to going barreling down the path of a sewer report, a full engineering report. If you're able to provide those calculations, we can confirm with DEC that a full engineering report will be required. And, you know, alternatively, you know, more than happy to point you in the direction of what would be required for a full engineering report as well.
this might not be an appropriate question, but are there any circumstances under which this hookup or expansion of the sewer would not be allowed?
I mean, we're working our way through this requirement as well.
Yeah,
And I don't think we have enough experience to know what DEC is going to say.
It's based on a number of items, including what, and if you stick around till other business, we'll get into a little bit more of it there, but it depends also on what sewer shed, what area of the city your sewage flows to. So the city is a combined sewer system, which has combined sewer overflows. And that means that stormwater and sanitary sewage go into the same pipes and occasionally overflow into the river. So under that, there are certain, the city has a long-term control plan, which regulates how additional flows can be added into the city or into the system. So it's not an easy answer. It's not an easy question to answer at this point, but you know, with the anticipated flow calculation provided, and then also it would be, you know, it wouldn't hurt to speak with city DPW to determine what sewer shed you are in and what, if you are tributary to a combined sewer overflow, a CSO. Those would be really good pieces of information to understand right from the get-go, and that way we can better advise on what the next step should be.
and then who makes the decision, the final decision, yes or no? Is that
In terms of the sewer approval?
Yeah,
So the city has to review and accept the report, and then the city, because they are the permit holder, sends it to DEC for their approval. DEC assumes that the city is reviewed and the report is in compliance with all of DEC's requirements. However, at the end of the day, DEC has the authority to modify. DEC is the permit holder or the permitter. So they're the only ones that can approve a modification to the city's speedies permit. So DEC.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And we can say this is something kind of new on them.
Well, the requirement has been around for a very long time, but this is,
And
Yes.
enforcement is kind of,
yes.
just got.
And your focus.
And this, yes. Okay, so can I get any more questions from the county board on, what we're talking about? Any questions from the public? Okay, can I get a motion to establish, can I get a motion to,
We
That's
we did a resolution, so
we'll have to get a motion.
to adopt the resolution.
To adopt the resolution to replenish to have 735 replenish the escrow. Only thing we need the amount. You know, a lot of things are coming down the pike and unfortunately 735 is going to be a part of that. So I need a motion that to adopt a resolution to increase the that they replenish the escrow a certain amount. Right now, their balance, I sent everybody a copy of the balance. And they need more money in there, so
I'll make the motion.
I'll say about 8,000. Any objection to that? Any other thoughts?
Something that needs to be approved right now. Like, are you asking?
Answer that. Don't answer that. Okay.
So I'll make the motion.
You make a motion, can I get a second on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution adopted that they will, you have to send a check to the planning, I'm not planning, but to, yeah, Linda?
We replenishing it to 8,000.
No, by 8,000, sorry. The permission by $8,000.
What is our balance now?
We could send it to you, want me to tell you right out? Or you can, we could send it, I'll send it to you through the mail,
Okay,
okay?
that just all happened really quickly, that's all. I didn't.
Yeah, when we were looking at some of the things that have to be done, we just said, you're gonna have to, you're gonna need one store. Okay. So, and I'll send you, so I'm just sending information to you with send stack, right? Okay, now, what is this? Can I get a motion to continue the public hearing for 7:35 to our June 13th meeting at 6 P.M.?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? Okay, now we're going to the next. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks.
Okay. I don't know, get a motion to open up this next.
Public hearing.
Okay, can I get a motion to open the public hearing for 250-252 Union Street?
Make a motion?
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so to. And emails. How are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Okay, so you're bringing us the 250-252. You're trying to merge two parcels, that, because we had this last month, was the public hearing, okay, great. He's gonna go over it again.
Yes, I'm Dustin James with Crawford and Associates, the land surveyor that worked on this. We're looking to do a lot merger. Combining these two parcels on Union Street, both owned by Union Pine QOZD LLC. On these two parcels are two attached houses, 250 and 252 Union Street. You can see this this building right here is 252, or this is 250, this is 252, and the interior property line partially runs along an existing partition wall between the two buildings. What we have here, some rooms from 250 Union Street actually encroach over the property line, and they are within the building of 252 Union Street. We're looking to eliminate this interior property line to remedy that encroachment between the two buildings. So these currently exist as two separate tax map parcels with an attached dwelling on each parcel. We're looking to eliminate this interior property line so it will become one singular parcel of approximately a quarter acre land.
Okay. Any questions from the planning board? Any questions from the public?
Well, look, does this differ from what you presented last time?
Nothing has changed. So
It's just a public hearing last time.
Okay.
no change in use, no construction, it's just eliminating the interior property.
Do we have any hands up? Okay, can I get a motion to adopt the resolution to approve the subdivision plat? Yeah,
We'll read it and then we'll close the hearing.
yeah. All right, for, what's that, it's 250, 252. You all got this, I sent it to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution? First, second, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, you approve.
All right.
Your plans.
Public hearing.
And the, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Does he need escrow?
Oh, wait a
I
minute,
think
we
said it.
did, we said that,
We
did?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 last time.
yeah, they have money.
I thought it was.
What's the address again? 250.
250.
Yes,
That was the last one, is that?
okay,
Okay, good, okay.
All right.
okay, so what you have to do is, we're gonna get this to you.
Okay.
Once all of the bills are paid, make sure you don't owe us anything.
Okay,
You take all your plans to Craig's office
okay.
and.
You want me to have these at Craig's office?
Yes,
You
I'll
don't-
stamp them at Craig's office.
Right, and they have to get us the consolidation deed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay,
All right. Yeah, dude.
enjoy.
Thank you.
What?
Go back and see his business.
Okay, so now we're gonna go to old business and, but can I, we have a resolution for this, right? Okay, 614 620 Columbia Street, which is the Hudson Forum Community Theater, is requesting a site plan extension. And tell me if I'm right, and it's, an extension is an extension on the provisions that we placed in their resolution.
Right, you approved their project with certain conditions, and they haven't satisfied all of the conditions yet. So they're asking for an additional 90 days to meet those conditions before the approval expires,
Right, so they want a 90-day,
which would bring them to August 26, 2023.
and we can get it done within that frame, they can jubilee. If not, they have to come back for another extension.
Yeah, they can have two 90-day extensions.
Okay. I wanna, yeah, so, could I get a, what is it? A motion to adopt a resolution to extend the subdivision approval for, the Hudson Forum, 90 days, yes. Gene, you have something? No,
That's a motion.
you, that's something.
Take it on.
Did anybody have anything to say about this?
No, I just asked a question.
Okay, so that's Gene, right? Yeah. Okay, so you first, who's second?
I'll second it. Bettina, Bettina.
You know what, Linda, you know what, Linda? I'm getting the names on this so I can get them out tonight, okay? All right, all in favor? Anyone, opposed? Okay.
I'm abstaining,
You abstaining?
because I live in a Gowan home, so I don't want potential conflicts.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice of you. No one else would do it, but thank you. Okay, Linda, who was the first approval on the resolution, for 250, who's the first one? The motion,
Jean,
Jean again, who's the second?
Randall,
And who was the, for the escrow? To increase the escrow,
Randall,
Randall,
John.
John. Okay, because I want to get those out now. Usually when I go home, I write them, send them right out. I'm done. Okay, now. Now we're gonna go to other business. So tonight, we're gonna have a presentation from Ryan, who is going to try to, I sent the summary over on, what day was it, Friday? Friday, yeah, Friday, there was a meeting with Ryan, Sandra, myself, with Mr. James from the
Jamie
DEC.
Malcolm,
Yeah. Who kind of, like Victoria said, the rule has always been there, but now it's being enforced. It was something that they realized wasn't being enforced, and now they're looking to do that. And the planning board has planned to set right in the middle, because we're the ones that's approving projects. We've already approved projects that we have to go back to, okay, or not us, but someone still. So Ryan is gonna go over the requirements of this and what is being, what is being told to us. And we hope that, he'll be available in the future to handle this on the planning board, just like he did with the 735, because they're gonna be probably the first applicant, that's going to experience that now. We'll have to go back to the episode. Okay, Ryan?
All right, thank you, Teresa. So you got a little sneak preview earlier of what we wanted to talk about this evening, and as Teresa mentioned, on Friday, a number of us met with DEC. James Malcolm is from the regional office, and he is has the city of Hudson under his purview. So to kind of set a little bit of the groundwork, and I'll slip into some acronyms. So just to define a couple things from the get-go. The city of Hudson has the sewer system, wastewater treatment plant. Those are all governed under an individual SPEEDIES permit. SPEEDIES, State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So that is the permit from the DEC that allows the city to discharge treated wastewater into receiving waters, into the river. And that governs all the operation, maintenance, testing requirements, and modification to the plant or the sewer system, which is specifically what we'll get into. And as I mentioned earlier, the city has a combined sewer system. So stormwater and sanitary sewage going into one system. The system is not sized to accommodate that when we have large rainfall events. So there's CSOs, combined sewer overflows, that overflow into the river, untreated sewage under those events that is permitted by the DEC. There's certain requirements there too, reporting, et cetera, that allow that. However, the city is required to develop a long-term control plan that governs the use of that and what modifications can be made to it, how the state, everybody wants to eventually, minimize, mitigate, abate combined sewer overflows, resulting in less untreated sewage into receiving waters. So under the city's SPEEDIES permit, and if you have questions or if I'm saying something that's too jargony as I go, just let me know. And
I want to ask you, is that legal for it to go into the river?
it is. It's permitted, and it's legal, and there's certain requirements with notification. However, it is allowable. And most old communities have combined sewer overflow. So this is not
Hudson River here.
correct. That's not something that's unique to the city of Hudson. You name Albany, Troy. You go, New York City is all a combined sewer system. So it's a very, frankly, common thing in older communities.
It's disinfected before it goes into the river too, from what I got.
The overflow is not.
No, it's not. It doesn't sound-
So in some
Their reports to the DEC, I get alerts on that.
So there is the city has multiple combined sewer overflows.
Right.
There is a combined sewer overflow at the plant. I'm not familiar, I don't know the nitty gritty that the plant operator or Rob Perry would know. But potentially the overflow at the plant may be disinfected. It may go through the disinfection process.
Right.
The individual, so at the South Front Street station, there's a CSO that I gather has been improved, so it is not utilized as much or potentially at all, but that would not have disinfection most likely. But CSOs are all regulated differently, and they can be different even within the city. So under the city's SPEEDIES permit, any SPDES. You got it. Okay, so under the SPEEDIES permit, it's governed by, if you're in correspondence, either some of our comment letters or some correspondence from DEC, they'll reference the Part 750 modification sewer extension. That is the part of state code that governs it. So what we're talking about here is any sewer connections and sewer extensions, and those are modifications to the existing sewer system. So a sewer extension is pretty straightforward. It's anything that you're physically extending an existing public sewer. So there's another application that we're assisting the board with, which would extend public sewer and have 16 hookups on it. That is a clear sewer extension. And that has to go through the process.
Wait, so that means that the extension is on the city's part?
In this case, it's a subdivision, that is, the applicant would be building the sewer. The long-term ownership and maintenance, I think, is still up in the air with that specific project. But let's take a hypothetical and get it completely out of the planning board realm. Let's say the city of Hudson wants to build a new street and put in a new sewer for 12 connections. The city of Hudson would have to apply for a sewer extension. So this requirement applies no matter who does it.
Okay.
So if the city wants to modify for an extension or a connection, they would have to go through the process, or any other applicant. Likewise, if there is a situation in which there's a building permit that would qualify the sewer connection, a qualifying sewer connection that doesn't have to come before the planning board, that project still needs to comply. So that's, and there may not be a situation where that wouldn't come in front of the planning board, but if it did, that would need to comply. So all sewer extensions need to go through the process, and then sewer connections over 20, new sewer connections over 2,500 gallons per day. So I used a reference earlier, but I jotted down a couple others. A 72-seat restaurant is 2,500 gallons per day. A 23-room hotel,
That's all it is.
a 500-seat concert hall. Those by themselves would be over 25. So it kind of gives you, in the 23-room hotel, so if you had a 12 unit apartment building and they were 2 bedrooms each, that would also be over.
Well,
20.
what is the 2,500 gallons? What, then if everything you said is over, what is the 2,500? What is it? Is it equal to 2 apartments with 3 bedrooms each?
So it would be,
Less.
it would be 20, so it's 23 individual bedrooms. So it would be equivalent of 8, if you had 8 3-bedroom apartments, that would be over 2,500 gallons.
And then when you say, when you make that application for the extension, is that to the DEC or to, who's that application made
So
to?
ultimately, the application to modify the city's permit is to the DEC. However, with a planning board project where a private applicant is proposing, that review, whether it comes to the planning board or let's say it just went through the building department, it would need to be reviewed and approved by the city first before passing it along to DEC. They have the ultimate approval to modify the permit. So when it comes to new connections, one clarification, and in the email that I believe Teresa has forwarded on to all of you, that DEC has made clear is the language is a new connection over 2,500 gallons per day. So there's, in terms of, if somebody's gonna build a new sewer, it's a vacant lot, they're gonna build a new sewer out, it's clear that it's a new connection. If there's an existing lot that has a connection, but it's gonna be over 2,500 gallons per day, what DEC has provided clarification on is that if there's a change in use. So for example, an auto repair garage to a restaurant and concert venue, that's a change in use over 2,500 gallons per day, requires a sewer extension. So that covers us how we get there. The other thing, we're gonna go back to the combined sewer system. So under the city's long-term control plan, the city is not allowed and agrees under the long-term control plan, which is approved by DEC, not to increase the occurrence or volume quantity of CSOs coming from from any of the number of CSOs. So in order to provide documentation of that, if you're having any new flows introduced into a combined sewer system, you need to provide a hydraulic analysis. Now this, again, whoever's proposing the connection, provide a hydraulic analysis documenting, proving that those additional flows will not cause, the overflow to overflow more times or more gallons, that there can't be an increase in either of those.
Who has to provide that?
So it would be the applicant's engineer. The one thing that this would change, and we mentioned on one of the applications this evening, is it's my understanding that there are portions of the city that are not tributary to combined sewer overflow. If a project is not tributary to, it does not flow by a CSO, they would not need to do this additional hydraulic analysis. However, if they do flow by it, they are required to do that. DEC will be looking at that. DEC would not be approving that connection unless that documentation is provided and it's satisfactorily provided.
But under what circumstances would it not be, let's say a hotel or any large emitter of waste, they would definitely be adding technically to the possibility of an overflow or of more overflows.
So I follow, I definitely understand the thought process behind that. When we get into the hydraulic modeling, because combined sewer overflows are caused by extreme rainfall events. So it can be very flashy, there can be mechanisms to detain, there's all these different nuanced little, it's a model. So it's not in reality, your system doesn't overflow now, but we're gonna add 2,500 gallons per day. Well, it would overflow more, right? Not necessarily. It depends on how the combined sewer overflow is regulated. Whether that could be modified. So this is something where, let's say an applicant came before the board with a hydraulic analysis and it doesn't work. That applicant could propose, it would have to be approved by the city, the operator, but the city or the applicant could propose modifications that they would pay for off-site to a CSO in order to become in compliance. Now, that's something that the hydraulic modeling would show.
So they can think about it, they could do storage, a temporary storage
Exactly.
tank that would hold.
And
the
it would
water,
all
so
need to be,
store in the
correct.
storm.
So there's a lot of different, really, the hydraulic analysis, it's not as simple as, well, we've got this flow and we're adding this flow, therefore, we're gonna create more. Because there's, usually very high peaks, but that might only peak for 5 minutes. So is that flow coming in at that time? Is it in 2,500 gallons? I do not know what the city's wastewater plant is permitted for in a dry weather or wet weather event, but 2,500 gallons per day is probably a very small percentage of what the city currently operates under. Most plants operate in million gallons per day, not in gallons per day. So those are really the two frameworks that we're working under. And it's in the end, it's the city's responsibility as the owner and operator of the wastewater treatment system to ensure compliance with the speedies permit, the sewer extension process, and the long-term control plan. So DEC leans on the city to review these applications and review these engineering reports before sending them to DEC. So anything that is over 2,500 gallons per day and is a new connection, whether it's a change in use or a brand new connection, needs to follow this process. And the other important thing to note that DEC provided on Friday is that projects that have been previously approved by the planning board, but have not yet received their certificate of occupancy, they have not completed the project, need to adhere to this. So there are a number of projects. When we went through 23-room hotel, 72-seat restaurant, you think of other projects that may have gone before the board in the last couple of years. So pending applications that have not yet received their CO, but have been approved by either this board or received a building permit, whatever it may be, DEC will be planning on requiring those projects to also adhere to the process.
Does that mean they have to come back to the planning board?
We should talk, I think we need to have an internal discussion in the city about what the process, first off, who's going to identify and make a list of these pending projects which all need reapproval, and what should the process be? Should they come back to the planning board? Should they be going to the Department of Public Works and doing a review there? Is the city who's gonna be reviewing these reports on behalf of the city? So I think we need to decide that.
Yeah, and that's in the email correspondence that I provided Friday. There's also an attachment, but those are some of the items in terms of next steps of kind of reviewing how does the city identify these projects from the get-go. So one potential example there would be on the site plan application form, to have a space where it says, what is your anticipated wastewater demand? Provide backup calculation. Now we can, definitely provide information on how to do that. And one of the attachments to the email is the DEC guidance on how to do so. And what that would allow is when an application comes into the planning board, says 2,500 gallons per day or greater, you know that you need to reach out to DEC and say, does this qualify? And Jamie Malcolm at the DEC was very happy to say, if you have any questions, if you're not sure whether it needs to follow the process, send it along. And he'd be happy to, say whether it does or not. And then also, as Victoria hinted at, this is a city permit and it's a city long-term control plan. And there are not all sewer extensions would necessarily go through the planning board. So it is important from a DEC standpoint and from a city standpoint that the city identify whoever the responsible party is. So ultimately, it's a permit to the city, but the city has to identify who is that responsible party. You can imagine from DEC standpoint, they want to know who to call, if they have questions, who is responsible for, following through on the process. The one specific request that DEC had was to put together a list of projects that have been approved, but not yet received a CO, with some additional information. So is it a 50-room hotel? Is it 30 two-bedroom apartments, et cetera, so that there can be a quick calculation done to say, no, this one is not a sewer extension, however this one is. So that is something that the DEC did ask for, and I know they were going to be looking at things on their end,
Yeah,
but
I think we're gonna have to work with Craig on that, because there are some things that's approved that didn't go to the planning board. I would only know what went through the planning board.
and in theory, other than city projects, I would think everything would go through Craig's office,
Yeah.
whether it's a planning board project or a building permit.
So that request should go. I don't want to do Craig. It's not my job. I'm not trying to give you work, bro, but somebody's gotta do it.
There's no choice.
Right, somebody's gotta do it. Yeah, because he would know where it goes, because he decides. We only deal with what goes to the planning board. Things that go to zoning, we don't know, and things that don't go to anything, we don't know.
Some
But no-
projects are as of right.
Right.
Yeah, but knowing this, given what Ryan has told us, we may be able to discover that in the process where it had been skipped over, so we're kind of a part of the line of defense.
Well, then we can give you what we did.
Yes, and that's kind of, we gotta identify, or the city needs to identify in a look back period of what's been already approved that didn't go through the process, but then also moving forward, whether it be on the site plan and building permit application to say, what is your anticipated wastewater demand? And then to have a process that says, okay, it sends up the red flag early, gets DEC involved, whether the city needs to, whatever the process is that the city will follow.
And DEC may have verbiage we can use in that respect, because other communities are doing it as well,
Exactly.
so. I know, it's not a rocket science.
This is not a test, the city of Hudson's not a test case. This is-
Can you estimate, what is the cost of these kinds of hydraulic reports? What impact is this gonna have on the ability of the restaurant to open?
So it can vary greatly. Let's take the situation that it's a sewer engineering report that is not tributary to a CSO, combined sewer overflow. So preparing an engineering report, it needs to comply. There's a set standard, it's called, we refer to it as 10 state standards. It's a standard that's adopted by the DEC and 9 other states. And it outlines what needs to go into an engineering report. But in a typical situation, let's say it's a restaurant that's coming in at 2,500 gallons per day. That report would outline the existing conditions, what they're proposing to do, the types of wastewater flows going to it. So an apartment building would be residential flows, restaurant's gonna have kitchen flow, sanitary waste. And then what are they proposing? What are the proposed improvements? So a restaurant should have a grease trap. An apartment building's not going to, it's just gonna specify the pipe going out to the road. And in those type of engineering reports are very straightforward. It's calculating the loading rate, how many gallons per day, and going through what is proposed. It gets more complex, when you're looking at building a new public sewer that's gonna have multiple connections, or let's say anything that would require a pressurized sewer,
Like 612.
like the other application before the board. And then, so It could be a very straightforward engineering report. I can't put a dollar figure because it ranges so much from
Like thousands or tens of thousands?
a very straightforward engineering report, by somebody that's already retained by an applicant could be a couple $1,000s. The one thing that I would know is when we get into combined sewer overflows. I've dealt with projects, not in a planning board perspective, but other projects that are tributary to CSOs. The hydraulic analysis that is required for that portion of the plan is it's not as simple as taking a sheet of paper and doing some calculations by hand and scanning it in and calling it a day. It's a very high level. It requires flow monitoring, flow data from other places in the city. It's likely something, some municipalities have models of their system already, which would be beneficial to applicants because they could build off of that information as opposed to starting from scratch. However, the projects that are tributary to a CSO, it would be more expensive. You know, to prove that CSO is not going to overflow more times or more flow is a difficult analysis, very intense analysis to do. Plenty of consultants, plenty of engineers do it. That it's not something that can't be done, it obviously can be done. But it's an intensive process, especially if the city does not have a baseline model to work off of.
Question. With projects that we've given the approval for, but haven't gotten their CMO from Craig, will he bounce those back up? Do you think, or do you think he'll resolve them himself? Just so that we know what to expect.
Meaning, will it come back from Craig?
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is going to depend on creating, so that list will be created.
Right.
DEC will review that list. DEC will then decide what they're going to say to the city, in what form they'll say to the city.
Right.
And then the city's going to have to decide from a city standpoint, but then also from a legal standpoint, does this change? I would think, and I'm gonna kick it over to Victoria on this. Is it a substantive change to the project, which would require to come back before and reopen seeker? So I could see a situation where it does not account to a substantive change, so long as they get their permit.
Right.
If they don't get their approval, they don't get a CO ever. So it's not, but if it's, you know, the pipe is there and they just need to get this approval, I wouldn't think that would be a substantive change. Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. If we get to a point where they have to put in maybe holding tanks or
Yeah.
some other mechanism as mitigation, then I think it does come back to the planning board if it's a site change. If it affects the layout or has to make a connection. If it's something that can just be handled with a sign off, sure, we reviewed your report, looks good, then that, we don't need to waste everyone's time coming back to the planning board.
Okay, and would it require any secret action at all on our part to?
I think it depends on what the action is, because when we did seeker, we already considered impacts, generally wastewater, right? It's
Right.
going into the municipal system has a permit. But if they have to, if it's going to cause, you know, a significant increase in overflows, then I think we do need to take a more site-specific look based on the new data.
So I think it's a multi-step process, which starts with that list.
We're all learning at this
Yeah.
point.
And there's a significant number of projects, I mean, Pocketbook Factory, Depot is picked, the
Right.
breweries like.
The hotel, the two hotels.
Especially
All the hotels.
especially if they're brewing on site, you know,
Yeah.
that's a
Yes,
high
they
risk.
are. They're gonna be
There's
going on site,
three breweries.
and they're gonna be going on site. Right?
2,500
Is
gallons
that
per day
what-
is not a lot to get to, you know, as we talked about. You know, it's 23 one-bedroom apartments.
Right.
It's a 72-seat restaurant. So it's easy to add up to that quickly.
So if I understand you correctly, the people that are coming forward for permits and those that currently don't have a CFO that applied, they'll have to do a calculation of their wastewater output then B, if it exceeds the 2,500 gallons, then they'll have to do an impact study or some sort of transformative flow study or.
Potentially, I think what I would probably recommend is the city prepare that list that has some sort of metric. How many apartment bedrooms, how many seats, so that the applicant does not need to, the applicant that was previously before the board does not need to be engaged at all unless it's identified that they need a sewer extension. So once we get to that, so the city or, you know, somebody's gonna do a quick calculation, you know, and it's all in this document. You know, there's a couple pages of tables, it's all just multiplication and addition. To put together and say, okay, this is 2,500 gallons per day, or this is 500 gallons per day. If it's 500 gallons per day, it can be crossed off the list. If it's over 2,500 gallons per day, then that applicant is going to need to be notified that they need to submit an engineering report.
And is the city gonna contact them? Or are they gonna have to self-supply and say, you know, we have this pending and.
I don't think we've come up with this, and I think we need to make the list first, and then I think it's gonna make sense for the city to do the initial reach out.
Yeah.
Matt, did you have something to say?
Just about storm drains, I think you mentioned it before that doesn't have to combine sewer and storm drain. And we have a storm drain on our property, and so the civil engineer will take that into account and all that, is there?
Yeah, so new stormwater connections to sanitary sewers are prohibited. However, do you know where your existing storm drain goes to?
Yeah.
Okay.
What does that mean? You just said something.
Okay, so storm drainage, like the catch basins you see on the street are prohibited from
You
going
mean
in.
like the little things that go along the gutter of the street? Is that a
Yeah,
sort of
they-
drain?
Yeah, so the gutters on the street go to, you know, usually on corners, there's grates that accept flow.
Right, things that your watch can fall in.
Exactly, so those,
Okay, got it.
those are components of the storm drainage system. New storm drains are prohibited from being connected to sanitary sewer manholes, sanitary sewer connections. So you can't mix storm and sanitary.
So a restaurant coming in could not. I don't even know.
Okay, so there's a difference between stormwater, which is water when it rains,
When it-
and the water's all around the parking lot, and wastewater, which is from the toilet. So you can't mix them, so, but even though you can send wastewater to the city sewer now, the stormwater from the rain all has to stay on the site. You can't have a new connection into the combined system.
So you cannot discharge stormwater, and those are referred to as illicit connections.
So were
So,
they doing it before?
oh, yes, for
Oh, so this is, cause
for
it sounds like it's been
decades,
done.
for decades,
Okay.
and that's what creates a combined sewer. When you have storm sewer and sanitary sewer, you have a combined sewer. So if there's an existing storm drain, no new connections can be made. However, the connection, and as we talked about, the hydraulic analysis is a result of the system and not what's going on your site. So let's say that is combined and you remove it, it doesn't change the fact that you're tributary to a combined sewer.
Okay.
However, that reduction would impact the modeling.
All right, so that's change. That is what is called change.
And we're more than happy, you know, to Jamie at DEC, I know would be happy to take any questions. I'm sure there'll need to be supplemental meetings and
And would you
discussion.
be happy to, if we, you know, to be there to, for the city as a resource?
I think someone's gonna have to review these reports on behalf of the city and assist, so.
A consultant, right?
Unless the city employee has the expertise and capability to review these reports.
What city employee would have that expertise?
Potentially somebody in Public Works, but either way. More than happy if you have questions, or need additional assistance,
You are available.
We can't hire him for the city, but the city
Can
can retain Ryan or Barton and Judas.
Do you think DEC might be able to do, kind of a primer for us, you know, a little education session, or, you know, is that?
I think Teresa extended the invitation.
I asked.
But
No,
what they can do is do like maybe an hour and a half presentation that goes out to every community in the state, a canned thing that would allow.
I think it's worth asking.
Yeah, I mean, because we're not alone in this, I'm sure. So, you know, if, and if everybody's on the same page, it's gonna make it a lot easier for everybody.
Of course.
well, you know, I'll definitely find out, especially if they have something already on their website.
That's possible too, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna recommend that you maybe write something to the city, ask, you know, letting them know that you're available. Right, don't we all agree that he should introduce himself to the city, to let the city know that he's available?
I think they do so.
They might not know, so, see, my thing is, I make sure they know, write the letter, then we know they know. You don't have to.
Well, and the correspondence went to the mayor's
Yes,
office
it
on
did.
Friday, so, at the request, I should say, at the request of the chair. And Mr. Perry as well, and Craig, and, Trey, and.
Because if it's something that was supposed to be done, it wasn't done, there's a reason for that.
Well, in DEC under, you know, I have not gotten the impression from DEC in any of our conversations that they're, you know, it's a moving forward situation. There is a little look back period, but there's, you know, there's been no indication that,
There's been a problem.
well, I mean, the problem is that, you know, the process, but nobody's been yelling.
We're not going beyond projects
Yeah.
Okay.
that are only pending.
Yeah.
Or potential.
They could ask us to go back to projects that have already been completed and issued to COs, but that hasn't happened.
City could also be one for fines,
Mhm.
you know, administrative
Yeah.
fines.
Right.
violations.
Yeah.
So,
There's been not an indication of that, but it definitely is within DEC's toolbox.
how about the planning, are we protected?
That's a
Yes.
legal question.
Good, yeah. Okay, good, we're protected, and we ought to be blamed, blaming and paying.
Well, you could be playing, but.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ryan, so
Welcome.
much.
Yes.
Appreciate everything you've done here. Okay, so now we're gonna move to approving the April planning board minutes. Thank you, Linda. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes? So can I get a motion to approve the April, what was it, April 9th, April 11th planning board minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, now we have the bills. I sent you all copies of the bills. Linda, I'm going to tear up the pages to give you so you can have them, okay? Can I get a motion to approve the planning board bill? Now, last month, we approved no bills. We didn't approve any. Did we?
No.
No.
we didn't.
So we have April and May bills here. Okay? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the bills to be paid? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have committee meetings. My committee meeting was with Ryan and Mr. James and Cassandra from the DEC. And Randall, you're a member of the,
The industrial development agency, the IDA, and we have a meeting tomorrow.
so what happened last week?
I was on vacation. That's right.
Look at those minutes. Love that.
Okay, so now we're gonna go into,
Well, if we're done with the meeting, we can close the
okay,
meeting and have.
can I get a motion to close the meeting, the May, right? Planning board meeting?
Oh, wait, you know what?
No, no, no.
We shouldn't close it if we have to do a vote after. So let's
Yeah.
make a motion to go into executive session. For an attorney-client session for advice of counsel.
Can I get a motion to go into executive session for attorney-client session?
I would
And counseling?
I would make that motion.
Second,